Today's presenters are Robert Blome, Senior Vice President of Sales and Alliances with Open Symmetry, Mark Donolo, Managing Partner of Sales Globe, and Michelle Seeger, Global Sales Strategy and Change Management Leader with Sales Globe as well. Robert is the Senior Vice President of Sales and Alliances at Open Symmetry. He is responsible for driving sales revenue globally for OS. With over 15 years of experience in sales effectiveness, performance management, and technology fields, Robert has managed consulting projects for Fortune 100 companies across a variety of industries. As a sales leader, he has experience with high growth and emerging businesses with a record of achieving business and sales goals. His charter at OS is to develop and nurture a world-class team of sales executives, managers, and individual contributors that are positive, highly motivated, and exceed goals while achieving the highest level of customer satisfaction. Mark is a founder and managing partner of Sales Globe, a sales effectiveness consulting firm that works with major sales organizations on sales strategies to grow revenue. Sales Globe focuses on helping companies grow profitably by developing and implementing strategies that improve the effectiveness of sales, marketing, and service organizations. Areas of focus include sales strategy, customer segmentation, channel strategy, sales organization design and deployment, performance management, and incentive compensation. Mark is also a regular conference speaker on sales compensation and is the author of numerous books and articles and publications. His recent books on sales effectiveness and reward include Essential Accounting Planning, 5 Keys for Helping Your Sales Team Drive Revenue, What Your CEO Needs to Know About Sales Compensation, Connecting the Corner Office to the Front Line, The Innovative Sale, Unleash Your Creativity for Better Customer Solutions and Extraordinary Results. Michelle is the Global Sales Strategy and Change Management Leader for Sales Globe. She is known for her unconventional thinking style, ability to identify for her clients, and successfully navigate an organization through change. Michelle consults, designs, and implements solutions across a range of industries, including technology, manufacturing, financial services, telecom, hospitality, retail, and consumer products. As a previous business owner of an international retail franchise, she understands the challenges businesses leaders face in a complex global business model. Michelle is a keynote and conference speaker and is frequently quoted in the national business and trade media on current and changing business trends that impact people, shape behaviors, and drive performance and cultures. At this time, I'd like to turn the floor over to Robert Blome. Robert, you now have the floor.
Yeah, hey Mike, thanks so much for the intro, and I appreciate the background. And for everybody on the phone, we absolutely appreciate your time, and I just wanted to say a quick hello so you could put a name with a voice. Before I turn it over to Mark, I just want to check. Mark and Michelle, can you hear my voice okay? I know Mike was breaking up as he was presenting us.
Rob, you sound perfect.
Yep, you sound great.
Okay, maybe it might be Mike's mic then. Mark, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Mark Donolo here, Managing Partner with Sales Globe. Glad to be with you. And Michelle?
Hey, yeah, it's great to have you all here with us today. And Mike, thank you again for the good introduction. So today, what we're going to be doing over the next 50 minutes or so is we're going to talk about aligning the sales strategy to the selling role in your organization. We'll discuss a little bit about differentiating performance levels. So how do you differentiate high performance from that which is not high performance or expected? Simplification of plan measures, one of the other keys to drive the results that you need, making sure that the team can understand the plan. And that will also play into motivating the team. So when they understand the plan and you've got good measures in there and they understand how they will play the game, and for performance, higher performance, there'll be higher rewards. That creates a very motivational plan. Then we'll talk about connecting the plan to the opportunity, and finally creating transparency through automation, and we'll pick up again with Rob at that part of the presentation. So with that, Mark is going to talk about the big 5 sales compensation challenges we've seen.
Great, thanks, Michelle. So before you get into talking about how to design the sales compensation plan, you have to evaluate how you're doing, and you really need to start with what we think of as a problem statement. And the problem statement starts with the issues or the things that you're trying to solve for. As we look across companies, here are the big ones that we tend to see, and some of these will look familiar to you regardless of what industry you're in, what type of business you're in. I always joke that everybody talks about how unique their business is, but when you get down to a couple levels below things like the industry, business model, you tend to see a lot of the same types of patterns. So setting effective quotas consistently comes up at the top of the list as one of the big sales compensation issues, although arguably it's not even part of the sales compensation plan, but a very hot topic nowadays as people are getting more and more into quota setting and refining their capabilities there. Differentiating top performers, what we think of as the reverse Robin Hood principle. So how do I overpay the top performers and not overpay the bottom performers, or tip up that payout curve? Supporting the sales strategy and roles, which is really at the essence of sales compensation design. We want the plan to support where we're going as a business and the people and the roles that are driving that. Solution selling, this one comes up a lot, and it's, you could argue, well, you can't really drive solution selling with the incentive compensation plan, but you can certainly enable it or support it. You've got other things that come along in terms of other upstream disciplines that we'll talk about in a minute that are really important around the strategy and the sales process to make that happen. Keeping the organization engaged. This is in regard to what do you do with people that are not hitting their goals, and how do we keep them pulling and moving along, and how do we keep the plan motivational? And then trying to do all of that while avoiding complexity or keeping the plan simple. So when you think about it at its core, the compensation plan is really a communications vehicle. So it's got to be able to get a message across, and the more complicated we make it, the harder it is to get that message across. So the big irony in all this is that while we have all these things we're trying to accomplish with the comp plan, a simple answer is actually a better answer. So let's take a look at big context, and I want to share with you two really big ideas here. We think of these as our laminators because these are good enough to laminate and stick on your wall next to your desk or carry into a meeting, because they're things that always come up in sales compensation design. The first idea, revenue roadmap, is the idea that sales compensation fits within a bigger context. So when you look at a sales organization and what it does to perform well, it really does a number of things that can fall into four major categories. It's got good insight on what's happening in the market, with its business, within the company, within competitors, and it's using that insight to then inform the sales strategy. And all the sales strategy is just a fancy couple words for an action plan to achieve a sales goal. That's all a sales strategy is. So it involves things like what we're selling, who we're selling to, think about segmentation and targeting, the value proposition or what differentiates us, and our overall approach to market. And then we put all those things into action with the coverage model. So you've got your channels, your roles, the sales process and engagement model. You also have the deployment. And then finally, enablement. The enablement layer is what supports all these things. And that's where sales compensation resides, along with other types of programs like recruiting and talent and training and development and tools and technology. So the big point here is that sales compensation does not sit by itself. It responds to what we think of as the upstream disciplines, and it has to be able to answer the questions or enable those upstream disciplines. So if we make certain statements around the sales strategy that we're going to follow and how the roles work, the compensation plan has to fulfill that. So that's kind of common sense. It also works in the other direction. A lot of times when we see issues with the sales compensation plan, they're not really sales comp issues proper. They can be issues with other misalignments further upstream. So think about this as kind of, chiropractic for sales compensation. If we have misalignments here, things are going to show up at one point. So if the sales process is not defined clearly, it's going to pop out in the sales compensation plan. So think about big picture, and then if you virtually double-click on that red box, you would see something like this, which is how do we look at sales compensation? And there are really a few major areas that you have to consider in terms of how sales compensation works, and one hint is that they don't start with the mechanics. So it's not about the commission rates, and too often we see that the first thing comes out is the calculator. Everybody wants to start working on what the numbers are going to be and how we're going to change the payout curve. It starts in the middle here with this idea called C-level goals that we'll talk about in a minute, and the sales roles. And the C-level goals are basically the big goals of the business, and the roles are the platforms upon which you're designing the sales compensation plan. So you can see those are coming directly out of the revenue roadmap. From that, once we've established that, we're going to be looking at some major areas like framing the plan. So what are the major components going to be in terms of the target pay, the mix, the upside potential? We talked about the reverse Robin Hood principle a second ago. Performance threshold, how people start to earn on the plan. Then you get into linking pay and performance together. So what type of measures and priorities do we want to use? Again, keeping them as simple as possible. The levels and timing of those, and then hooking them into mechanics, or the connection between pay and performance. Then we go into aligning the team and financials, so making sure the plans are congruent across the organization so people aren't operating at odds with each other, setting the quotas and the goals, and then finally operating the plan. So your governance, your operations, the automation of the plan, and the ongoing evaluation of the plan. So as you evaluate the plan, you want to take a spin around this one time, and then as you design the plan, you want to take a spin around it again. And this is pretty exhaustive in terms of the major areas that you want to consider. So with these two big ideas, as we go through today, a lot of the things we're going to talk about today will fit within the context here, and I'd say a lot of the issues or challenges you're dealing with are going to fit within that context as well.
Great, Mark. So now what we're going to do is look at the 6 points using the sales compensation diamond as our guide that will help you drive the results you need in your comp plan. So as Mark said, it starts in the middle with the C-level goals and the sales role. And when we talk about C-level goals, what is that? Those are really the biggest priorities that really cover the revenue roadmap points that Mark previously talked about. And we think about that from the executive level. What are the most important things that need to be accomplished? And we think about these in the 5 different areas. So we think about the customers, so the buyer and segment priorities, for example. So who are the right types of companies and your buyers for your business? Your executives are asking on your product, where are you going to focus? What products and services are you going to emphasize? What's important? Is cross-selling, for example, important to your business and a priority? When we talk about the coverage model, that's going to be looking at making sure your resources in the market are matched, and you're looking at things like your sales channels. It can be direct or indirect partners, the routes to market. We talk about the talent. If we talk about coverage, we also want to think about the talent, so the skills required and the talent inventory you need to support your strategy. That's going to inform the types of roles that you need and what you're looking for, depending on the complexity of the products and services, for example, that you're providing. And then finally, the financial goals, right? So at the end of the day, we're all in business. You are in business to make money. So this would be the growth required to support the priorities of the organization. So what is it? Is it gaining market share? Is it profit? Is it ROI? So those are the things that you'll be looking at when you're thinking on your C-level goals. And you want to make sure that your roles are aligned to those goals. And we just discussed your financial goals and revenue. So where does revenue come from? We have found that revenue, it really comes from 3 sources. So you've got your retained revenue, retention, and that would be anything you had in the previous year. So starting with your fiscal year, what did you already have and what your retention looks like? And then there's penetration, and that can be either through new products and services or new buyers within an existing client or account. And then there's new markets and new competitive wins. So this would be market or product growth of your business. So understanding what priorities are for your company around the components of revenue and then aligning the roles to that is what is key. So if we look at the roles themselves, we discussed retention, penetration, and new. And you all have heard about the hunter-farmer model, and we actually like to explain it in the canine model. Just has a little bit more detail. And what's important here is that when you're looking at your retention revenue, that's really more like service delivery. So you're not really motivating or wanting that person to grow new business, but make sure you don't lose any clients or lose any existing revenue from that client. So it's all about service. And we think about that in terms of the collie, which you all know a good collie dog is a good service dog, if any of you have one. Account management. Account management would be for penetration in the existing account. So if you think about the retriever dog we have here, they're really, really good about taking care of everything that's in their backyard and making sure that every opportunity and everything that's there, you don't want a lot of squirrels in that backyard because they're going to be gone, right? So if you think about the retriever, that's what they're going to be doing, and that is thinking about the the attributes of that person who would be able to grow within the existing account. And then you've got your Doberman or your account acquisition rep. And that would be, again, talking about getting out and getting new logos, new clients, new accounts, new products. And there's a certain type of breed or individual that's right for all three of these roles. So you want to make sure that you're looking at the role and the motivation, what motivates each one of these roles, and making sure that ultimately the incentive plan is aligned to that. So alignment success factors in a nutshell. You're looking at identifying the C-level goals of the executive team and the stakeholders, making sure that you align your sales roles, and we just talked about the three key ones that are aligned to the revenue, making sure that they're aligned to your C-level roles, and then you'll make sure that you're building your plans by those roles. So as we get a little bit more into the next area, framing the plan, we're going to talk about it in the context of the three roles that we just discussed. So framing the plan, we're going to talk a little bit about pay mix, upside, and performance thresholds. The first point, again, we're referring back to the K9 model when we talk about pay mix and aligning your plan to your role. We're looking at total target compensation. So we're not talking right now about what the total pay is, pay level benchmarking, but this is in the total target compensation. It's the percentage of base salary to that which is variable or incentive. And what we found best practices are is that when you look all the way over to the right, the real hunter role, they're motivated by going out there and getting new business, and they're motivated by that incentive. And you want them out there getting new logo business, so you want them focused on that. So what we have found is that if you give them a 50-50 mix is actually ideal. Many companies go as high as 60-40, and we've seen some 40-60 as well, 40 base to 60 variable. What we found is that motivates that role. It satisfies that role. They want to go out there and see how much they can earn. As you move over to the left, you're looking at account management and then finally service delivery. Talk about the service delivery. So that would be all the way at the other side, and what you really want is that person not focused on new revenue and getting out and getting that business and really being focused on their variable comp. But what you want them to do is do a great job of taking care of your current clients and your current revenue. So you put a little bit in there, right, for the incentive because it's motivational, and they may have some impact with renewals, for example, that may be ultimately closed by your account manager or potentially a service delivery role. But basically, you really want them focusing on the account itself and retaining that revenue, so you'll tend to have a lower mix. We talk about the pay mix and the upside potential, and we discuss what really motivates the role. The greater the risk, the greater the reward. The lower the risk, the lower the reward. That's just a best practice. So why did I say that it's a really good idea to put a 50-50 mix in for something like a hunter role that's really motivated to go out there and close that new sale? Because if I've got 50% target incentive opportunity, you want to give them at least a 50% or higher opportunity to earn above target. So target total compensation, again, that would be the total amount of dollars, a combination of base and incentive that you would expect anyone who's performing at the level you expect them to perform to earn in the course of a year. So this would be at quota. What you really want is to drive and grow that business with this new hunter role, so you give them an opportunity to earn substantially more for exceeding the targets you set.
So let's take a look at how we're going to see this in reality. So as you know, Michelle, you talked about the upside potential. You know, that's great when you look at it in a textbook, but what does it really look like when you're examining the business? And this is a fun little metric that you can do that looks at the upside and the downside in the plan, and it tells you a few things in terms of where you may be differentiating or maybe where you need to differentiate more. So let me take you through this idea real quick, and this is about as deep in the math as we're going to get today, I promise. So, so all these little dots here you see are people, or they represent people. And the horizontal axis, what we're doing is we're plotting quota attainment percentile. So it's not quota attainment, but it's quota attainment percentile. So it's not like somebody hitting 100% of quota. It's sorted from the first percentile to the 100th percentile. So a quota attainment level might be, say, at 40%. And in this case, what it shows if it's at 40% is you've got 60% of the people that are at or above quota. And when we get into methodology around quotas, you'll see that that's what we really want to do, is we want to have the majority of the population at or above goal. So everybody's winning and everybody's in the money. So that's one side, quota attainment percentile. Then you want to take a look at actual incentive divided by target incentive. Well, what's that? That's percent of target incentive earned. So if you have $10,000 of actual incentive divided by $10,000 of target incentive, 10,000 divided by 10,000 is 1 or 100 in this case. So right in the middle, that yellow cross that you see there, that's our target performance, people hitting quota, and what they're earning. And you can see that they're earning right around target compensation or target incentive for hitting quota. Look to the right with the green cross, then we can see what people are earning at that excellence level. We usually define excellence level as 90th percentile of performance. And depending on the design of your plan, you may have something that's a 2-to-1 or 2.5-to-1. You might want people earning, say, 200% or 250% of target incentive if they're a 90th percentile performer. So we see people up in that range, so that looks pretty good. But you do see some that are higher and lower in that same range. And then the real watch-out spot, and particularly in this example for this company, is that red cross down there, the threshold level, which you can see a lot of people around 10th percentile, which in this case was actually pretty low actual performance. They're doing pretty well. In fact, some of them are almost earning target incentive for threshold level performance. And you might go, well, why is that? Well, it could be due to other components in the plan as a possibility, right? So when we talk about performance, we have to make the first assumption of performance is X. Performance is around revenue or bookings or profitability or wherever that key measure is. So the more you have in your plan, again, going back to the idea of complexity, the more you have in your plan, the more static there's going to be in this. Because you want to use something like this to run a quick check and see, do I have differentiation in the plan and am I overpaying? So what we'd really like to see is where the green X is, that we're hitting up in that range, but we'd like to do some probably tightening up in this particular example down in that 10th percentile area. So just kind of a quick fun metric, fun depending on what kind of person you are, if you like math.
All right, so we all know that we have to have the analytics, and that actually is a great point. So when we go in and consult with our clients, so many times what we find is when we run this information, these analytics for them, they find out that they're really not differentiating the top performers. And the whole point behind the reverse Robin Hood principle is, let's save some of that budget for the top performers and make sure that you're not overpaying those that aren't performing at the level you expect. So getting onto a more fun model, we're going to talk about thresholds in the plan. We're continuously asked, do we put a threshold in, when and where? Many times we say no when you're out there getting new logo business. And so, Mark, we've worked with our clients to pull together a really simple plan for them to understand when or when not to use a threshold. So again, this is just kind of a fun model, but basically we ask the question is, what portion of quota would recur without the rep? So my slide isn't working the way that it should. It's usually animated, and this bus comes across the slide and it hits that person. We say, if your rep was hit by the bus tomorrow, what percentage of revenue would come in anyway? And that's typically where you would choose to set the threshold in the plan. So basically, if we say nothing would, so it's new logo business, new product, maybe a complex sale, we just pay from the first dollar. If you're even questioning that, we say just pay from the first dollar. You might want to move over into a higher threshold if you know that a lot of the quota would come in and it's annuity business. And if you think about that, a lot of times, maybe you don't even need the threshold in the plan. That could be work that your service delivery person is doing, and at that point, we talked about that 90-10 split in the plan, so only 10% would be incentive anyway. So you got to really think about your role and what they're selling and determine if the threshold really does apply for that role or not.
Yeah, and this is really where it does tie back into the roles, because you can, you know, with the K9 model, you could literally see some of the roles in here. So your Doberman's going to be down in that lower left as an example, and your collie might be in the upper right.
That's correct, yep. Okay, so summarizing the differentiation success factors, we talked about matching the pay mix to the role. So again, you're going to have a higher variable with your hunter roles than you would with service delivery or customer success roles, for example. You want to make sure you differentiate your top performers from the rest of the pack, and you want to create upside in the plans that increase as performance increases. So we went through that concept very quickly, but once you hit your quota and you start looking at high performance, paying even more for that incremental over target is very motivational, especially for that hunter role, and we always recommend that you look at that as part of your planned budget. Mark?
Great, so let's get into linking pay and performance together. And first thing we want to talk about is the idea of performance measures. And you'll see a lot of the way we think and a lot of the things we do are to simplify and organize thinking so that then you can start to, apply your creative juices to it. So too often what happens is we come into a room, we're working on the comp plan, and there are a whole range of issues, there's a whole range of potential measures we might want to look at. And to the degree that you can start to sort these things out and make some logic out of them, it'll really help you. So this idea of the performance measure cube here, I wanted to share with you real quick. We really, when we look at performance measures, see three major dimensions. One is the measure itself, the other is the level at which we are measuring, and the third is the frequency of measure. So if you think about those three pieces, you can kind of play with that Rubik's Cube and come up with the right combination for each job. So when you go to the measures, as an example, think about four levels of measure. You've got financial measures, which are things like revenue, profitability, could be units. Those are usually the things that show up on the financial statement. And the financial measures are the ones that you would, like to lean toward if you had nothing else. You lean toward those financial measures. So they say, you need to sell more, you need to create more profit, et cetera. The next level down is looking at customer measures or strategic measures. And what we mean by this are measures that talk about how we're getting to that financial result. So it could be customer mix, could be product mix. And if you think of a metaphor, if the financial measures are, say, the gas pedal, the customer measures are kind of like the steering wheel. It's saying, okay, I want revenue, but I want it in a certain way. So back to the roles you were talking about, Michelle, I want revenue in terms of customer penetration or maybe new customer acquisition. Forecast measures could be milestones or activities or events, things that could ultimately lead to that end result, that financial result. We don't usually want to use forecast measures unless we don't have anything else that we can grasp onto, or maybe there are, we can't actually find another type of measure to get to that result we're looking for. And then at the bottom we have the swamp of performance measures, your qualitative measures. Think about key sales objectives or measures that are a little bit more subjective. So if you had your preference, you would lean toward those top two areas, financial and customer measures. So as you're thinking about the plan and you're sorting through plan design options, think about how you sort those measure types. Now the level has to do with the level of measurement in the organization. So it could be company level, so I might measure revenue or profit at the company level, division, team, or individual. So the rule of thumb there is you want to be as close to the action as you can, as low down as you can at the individual or team level. And then with frequency, you could certainly measure monthly, quarterly, annually, or on a greater than annual frequency. The rule of thumb there is you want to be as frequent as possible as long as it doesn't go faster than the cadence of the sales cycle or the sales process. So your preferred position on this cube is going to be that leading edge. So if I could pick anything, it'd be financial measures at the lowest level, maybe individual level, and monthly or as frequent as practical. So think about this in terms of how you might sort out the measurement possibilities. And then if we take a look at mechanics, I'm going to make a very complicated subject very, very simple here, and I promise I'd minimize the math. So you could break mechanics into a couple types, rate-based and quota-based or goal-based. And I challenge you, if you throw any mechanic at me, I could tell you it's going to fall into one of those two categories. In fact, we do in our workshops rapid quizzes to see if people can sort them out quickly. Rate-based are going to be mechanics that are maybe you often call them commission rates. So they're paying for each or every transaction or dollar. So when you see language in the plan that says for each dollar or each unit you're going to get paid a certain percentage, or you see per or of, you see that language, it's usually indicating a rate-based plan. Very effective for situations where we may not know what the quota is going to be, because we don't have to set a quota for that. We can have a fixed cost of sales. We're going to just pay 2% of revenue. Also very effective for a commission plan or a compensation plan where you want hunters to go out or Dobermans to go out. So it's a very simple type of plan to structure. As the organization gets a little more sophisticated, you've got overlay roles and more complex types of jobs. Very often you go to a goal-based or a quota-based plan. And that is simply basing it off hitting a certain goal. So that's a true pay for performance equation. So it says if you hit your quota of $3 million, you're going to earn whatever that target incentive is for hitting that quota. And it scales up and it scales down above and below that. Now, what I will also say is that these are almost like the skin on top of the compensation plan, because when you dig down below both of them, they both have the same core components. So you can find the effective commission rates within quota-based plans, but it's a different method of designing and shaping and being able to communicate the plan. So I'll show you a couple of quick examples of each one here. Commission rate, here you can see a very simple stepped commission rate. So you might pay 2% of revenue, or maybe you pay a certain percent of revenue depending on where you are relative to goal. So where I said, you know, you could just pay a commission rate, not worry about the goal. You could also pay a commission rate that varies depending on how close you get to the goal. Or you could vary it by product type or other types of measures as well. So many variations you could play off of on the commission rate. And then your most simple garden variety quota-based mechanic, and this is one I like to show as we start talking about quota-based mechanics and then we work out from this, is basically saying you've got a target and then you've got a certain amount of pay you're going to get for that target. And you can see on the left-hand column it tells you what your target or what your quota is, and on the right-hand side it tells you what you're going to get paid for hitting that quota. So if you hit 100% of your target, you're going to hit 100% of your target incentive, and if you go above that, it scales up. Go below that, it scales down. You can see a couple of characteristics in here as well. There's a 200% of target payout on the right-hand column, which should show that excellence level, and then you can see a threshold on the bottom there below 40, so you can see some of those principles here inherent in the design that we're showing you here. And in reality, you know, you would see those at every percentage point step as well. This one here is just one extension of the goal-based plan, and we won't go any further than this on the mechanics at the moment. But what this is showing you is I could take the basic goal-based or quota-based mechanic, and those first two columns are the same as what we saw on the prior page, but you could put different characteristics on it. So you could say, well, you know, our C-level goals are telling us we want to be able to sell a full portfolio of products. So depending on the number of service line goals you hit, you can actually increase your upside. So you can see the upside gets better above 100% as you hit one service line quota, two service line quotas, you know, plug in whatever variable you have there. But you can motivate people to do more by increasing the upside. And this is a non-punitive plan where you could certainly have the downside deeper as well. So this one is a little bit more of a positive motivation. So many, many variations in mechanics. We could probably spend several hours just talking about, you know, mechanics alone. We just want to give you a couple flavors there. So on the mechanics, things to think about in the measures, of course, using 3 or fewer measures, no less than 20% of weight on each. Why is that? Well, again, simplicity. The fewer measures, the better, because people are going to know exactly what they have to do. 20%, when you start to go below that number, the plan itself doesn't have the same impact. The measures don't have the same impact. So you really need to have some beef in those, especially when you think about the frequency of pay and you start dividing that out by quarter or by month. It gets smaller and smaller. Measure and pay as close to the event as possible. We talked about that with the cube. Measure only what's transparent, understood, and trusted. Okay, so if your C-level goals say, we want to measure profitability, we want to drive profitability, but a Doberman rep doesn't control profitability. That Doberman controls being able to go out and get the deal, and they don't have pricing control. You don't put profitability in the plan. So it's got to be transparent, and it's got to be understood, and it's got to be controllable by that person. And then keeping your mechanics simple. So we just showed you a couple of very basic ideas, but mechanics are a high-risk area because you can get way too complicated and, again, confuse the message. So keep thinking about how do I make sure that my message is very, very clear.
So we've just covered the first 4 critical success factors to driving the behaviors that you want in your plan. We talked about alignment of C-level goals to the role and to the plan. We talked about paying for performance, so differentiating performance. And we just talked about simplifying your plan and motivating. And now we're going to talk about we're going to talk about quotas. So I'll just talk about some studies that we do at Sales Globe around top quota challenges. And quota seems to come up all the time with organizations. And we like to tell you that, the reality is you can have the best plan in the world, but if your quota setting isn't the way that it needs to be, or it isn't aligned to the opportunity, then it doesn't really matter. Mark, you want to talk about some of our experience in around the top quota challenges?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing here is as you look at the big challenges, and you can see some of them listed here from high to low, not having good historic information, we don't have an effective process, reps don't believe in the quota setting process, the data's bad, the quotas create a performance penalty. Often when we're doing historic quota setting methods, we get performance penalties because you have a great period followed by a bad period because your quota goes up. The quotas aren't transparent. What you'll notice about this is it's not all about the numbers. So there are about half of these that are people and process oriented. So when we approach quota setting and when we work on quota setting projects, we really are looking at the people aspects of this as well, which is really important. So don't get all into the numbers on this and think that's all it's about. And don't let finance tell you it's all about the numbers. You need to have them on the team. They need to really understand, all the dimensions of quota setting.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about that, Mark.
Yeah, so this is what we call the quota success model. And again, with our mission of trying to simplify thinking around sales compensation and sales effectiveness, the big idea here is if you look down that center column, what you'll see is how the goal is getting set. So it's coming from the corporate goal, from on high, from investor expectations, to the various levels down to first level of the market, and then down to management levels and down to the front line. So there are various puts and takes that are happening, bottom up and top down happening depending on your methodology. But the two balancing factors here that you really have to think about with quota setting are the thing that's on the right, which is the opportunity in the market. So if we're using historic quota setting processes, we're missing all that. We need to know what the opportunity is in the market. So it could be revenue, potential, growth rates. There are a lot of factors that can feed into that, and there are many methodologies you could use. But the other piece that doesn't get considered enough is the left side, sales capacity. So sales capacity enables us to hit the quota. So you can hand out huge quotas, but people won't be able to hit them if you don't have the capacity. And you can see some of the major factors on sales capacity have to do with time allocation, so what we're doing with our time and decontaminating our sales roles so we can optimize our time. Workload, how much effort it takes to actually do the jobs, whether it's going out and getting a new account or managing a current account. So that has a number of factors in workload that you can see there. And of course, headcount. So I need more people or I need better talent. So the degree that you can pull those levers, you can do a better job of hitting those. So again, pulling back up to the high level, when you're doing quota setting, think about how all these big picture components go together, then drill down. Don't get lost in the minutia. Some of my favorite, and this will sound a bit nerdy, some of my favorite quota setting methods, we talk about these at dinner.
Yeah, we do.
But this kind of shows you a quick range from historic types of methods to opportunity-based types of methods. And I'll just make a simple point. I won't go through each one of these, but you want to move toward more of the opportunity type methods. So the historic methods, the issue with them is, yeah, we know what everybody did, but you can't predict the future using history. It gives us a good baseline, but you can do other things to modify that historic information around growth rates and market opportunities. But try to push toward those opportunity-driven types of approaches, whether you're looking at correlations of potential or what's in the pipeline and what we think we can get within the market that we have. So push toward those methods that you see on the bottom. Again, this is another probably day session we could do just on quota setting, which would be fascinating. Yeah.
Yep, it is.
So what are we looking for? We are looking for a good distribution. Well, what's a good distribution? We want about 50 to 70% of people at or above quota. And you can see this distribution, you do have that. You also see a few other issues in this distribution, which is you have a lot of people bunched around quota. I'll go back to that in a second. But why do you want that? Well, you want predictability of the business plan. You want to know that you're going to be able to get to your goal. And so that helps with predictability if people are hitting the goals. And you want to be able to manage your compensation cost of sales. So if you've got erratic distributions of performance, depending on how your plan is structured, you could be thrown off by accelerators, and you could be exaggerating your cost of sales because of how your plan is designed and how you're hitting quota. And then finally, motivation. You want a culture of winners. This executive told me a while back, he said, well, we want about 40% or so of our people hitting quota. And I'm like, why is that? And he goes, well, we want it to be a very special thing. And I'm like, okay, so 60% of your organization feels like losers. That's not a good thing.
No.
So to answer my question before, the problem with this distribution, you'll see a lot of people bunched very close together. When I see a lot of people in, say, 90 to 99% of quota attainment, and they're all bunched in, what that's telling me is they don't want to get to goal, either because there's a penalty for doing that because their quota is going to go up. Some organizations, people manage right around that, or maybe there's something in the plan mechanics that just doesn't make it worth it, right?
Right.
So there are a lot of causes that can go into this.
Some caps are put in place, things like that we don't recommend in the plans as well. Yeah.
So success factors to connect the plan to quota. Keeping the process transparent to the organization. This one always makes me laugh because we've worked with a number of companies and they say, yeah, we've got a quota setting process. And through a series of email forensics, we can find the process because they've communicated it, but it's never been explicit. So you've got to have it transparent to the organization. If people know how the goal is set, they're more likely to buy into that goal and more likely to achieve that goal. Using market-driven processes, like we talked about just a minute ago, understanding your sales capacity and balancing that out with opportunity. You have to have both sides of that equation from that quota success model. And unrealistic quotas don't motivate the team. They can't be achieved. There's one big company that we work with. I won't tell you where they are because you can probably guess, but they have really aggressive quotas. They're heavily finance driven, and they turn people over like water. And they basically deplete the market of sales talent because they turn people over because of their high quotas. So that's a very dangerous thing. You want to be able to have quotas that are achievable because your cost of turnover is tremendous if you're creating that as an effect of bad quotas.
Yep. Okay, so those are the top 5 factors, and now we're going to move into the 6th one, and we'll turn this over to Rob. Rob, you're going to talk about measuring and the importance of automation analytics.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Mark. So yeah, I'm going to shift the focus a little bit away from some of the constructs of plan design, best practices, and over to the analytics or the technology side of things. Having been in the space for a number of years now, I think one of the biggest disconnects we've seen consistently is this concept of deploying sales plan design best practices and then not having the technology to manage it or to monitor it on an ongoing basis. So, with the few minutes we've got left on our time with you, what I wanted to do is offer up some different concepts and some thoughts to help you think about different ways to monitor or manage the sales compensation program itself. So the slide that I have up is essentially what we've grouped, if you will, the different ways of looking at sales compensation program performance. So that first area, the performance in the top left screen, is really understanding the rep's performance. Now, Mark and Michelle showed a number of slides that kind of pinpoint some quota attainment by rep or commission performance by rep. But, this is an area or a focus that a sales compensation program could take a genuine look and a deep dive into, not just to look at, how many orders did they close, how much revenue have they driven, but really look at it from a sales plan design perspective. So what percentage of sales reps are performing above quota? What percentage of field sales is on target? These are great questions to ask and great indicators if the plans are actually healthy, if they're driving the right behaviors from a standpoint of performance at the rep level. The next area is pay and rates. So it's understanding the pay and rates for sales reps and teams. So questions that you could ask of the data are, what is the variable pay for each sales rep? So being able to compare and analyze different variable pay structures across the reps in a way that will allow you to compare and then ask questions about it will give you kind of those insights that you need to answer and understand how the reps are actually performing. So another little bit of a deeper dive could be the percentage of reps that are on target versus 2x versus 3x. So as Mark showed that one slide that talks about percentages or percentiles over quota, you can dig specifically into this on your own level. Sorry, could you back up, Michelle? So that's really kind of what that's talking about. And then you can even get into some really very specific reports around, how much large commission payments, right? So looking for anomalies in the system where reps have made way more than you may have anticipated them making on one or two deals. Another area is on plan design. So it's a little bit of a different look on plan design versus pay and performance. On plan design, we're really looking at a comparison or analysis of the designs or the plans that people are assigned to. So you could look at things such as OTE by role. You could look at target commission by role. You could set this up to understand how many reps, how many managers are being paid off of a single transaction. So that's really kind of gets into the fundamentals of the plan design, right? The crediting logic and things like that. But if you set up your analytics to provide that kind of content, you'll get a very good understanding of how the plans compare across the different roles and even within the teams themselves. And then the last bucket is finance and accounting. So this is really sort of the lens that your CFO will want to look through to understand if the plan is performing as advertised. So this could be simple things such as actuals versus targeted expense costing, understanding what your monthly accruals are, and then understanding things like clawback, your amount of clawbacks per pay period and things like that, and how they'll affect your expense accounting. So anyway, so this is. There's different ways of looking at, putting together analytics and dashboards and things of that nature. I would offer that if you're going down this path or you haven't been down this path before, think about it in the different buckets and how you guys want to start looking at the data. A great way to think about this is when you come out of a plan design effort, if you sit down internally or with a consulting firm like Sales Globe, the opportunity is to say, okay, coming out of this plan design effort, what are going to be the good indicators that let us know if the plans are actually delivering what they should have? So from that standpoint, you can develop very simple graphs like this that allow you to see your bell curve across your quota dispersion. And then within that, in this situation, this was actually a client we worked with a couple years ago, and this is a graph we put together with them. But in this situation specifically, the client immediately saw that they have way more people below the 100% threshold than they should have. Mark mentioned a best practice is 60% of your folks above 100%. This is absolutely one of those situations where the client expected to see that, and it actually drove them to a conversation internally at mid-year to adjust quotas because they have a high tenure. The folks that work there are the folks that have been selling there have been there a long time, and they didn't want to have a turnover issue. So this gave them a chance to see this mid-year and actually make some adjustments. So whether it be quota distribution or any of the other concepts that we just discussed, the idea is to have your thumb on the performance of the program in such a way that you can anticipate and deal with things that come down the pipe. So performance analysis objectives, if you're going through this, some easy best practices to keep in mind is make sure it's easy to use. If you're putting reports, analytics, dashboards together for the users, make sure you're thinking about the user themselves, the type of person or type of role that they have, the type of skill sets they have, and make sure that you dial this into their capabilities. Another area to think about is right level content, right? You want to provide actionable data, stuff that people can see and say, oh, wow, I've got to do something about this, or I need to report this, or we need to handle this in such a way that we can alleviate whatever issue this might be causing. So think about it not only as role-based, but the content that's going to support that individual role. Another thing to think about is keeping the reports and the analytics dynamic. It's okay to provide static reports to the payees for comp statements and order detail and things like that, but when you're putting together analytics and dashboards that monitor the performance of your program, you want to make sure they're dynamic enough to allow you to push and pull different levers to see what's going on in the program itself. And then lastly, your core team that will be looking at this analytics, it might be a one or two executives, your core administrative teams, your comp plan design owner, have the ability to export this data out so that you can send reports and send content to different people that we're going to have to make the decisions or at least see what's going on in the program. And then lastly, if you do this right, you're going to be able to create a timely feedback loop for seeing and understanding what's going on in your compensation program. So when I talk about timely, I think one of the biggest advantages of doing this is that, some of the analytics and some of the analysis that is done on plans today is often at the end of the year. This, if you do it right, will provide feedback to your organization on monthly, quarterly, or semi-annual basis. And I think that's really critical to at least stay in touch with the program and make sure you're adjusting to the market as you need to. You're also going to be able to manage the performance of your program, right? So if you can measure the performance, you can manage it, you can make the adjustments, you can do the things you need to. So taking advantage of being able to see this data on a more frequent basis, hopefully you're going to be able to get in and make some adjustments. As I keep alluding to, supporting the plan design process. So instead of waiting to the end of the year to amass all of the data and look at how the program has performed, you'll be able to see it earlier, you'll be able to use it sooner, and then at the end of the year, if you do wait till that long, you'll be able to pull that data much, much faster. I would offer being part of plan design projects, a big piece of the effort is just gathering the data. So putting a program like this together, leveraging analytics and content that is going to allow you to make decisions along the year will also help when it comes time to make informed decisions around where the plans are going to go. So at this point, I know I only had a few minutes to broach that subject, guys. So if there's questions specifically on reports, analytics, best practices, and things of that nature, I'd be happy to take them. I think, Michelle, do you want to cover this last slide, and then we'll open up to questions?
Sure, I'll jump in here real quick. This is not Michelle.
Okay, Michelle, go ahead.
But thank you, Rob. We do have a few questions here we'll take just in terms of next steps. And of course, take a look at the book, What Your CEO Needs to Know About Sales Compensation. It's got a lot of these ideas and a lot of great interviews as well. You can get that on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And then Rob and Michelle and I are going to be at World at Work in Dallas in a couple weeks. Talking about effective sales compensation and at the corner of plan design and operational assessment. So that's going to be an interesting session. So if you're in Dallas, come join us there and feel free to reach out to us with any questions you might have. We're also going to be having at Sales Globe a web series of interviews on strategic sales compensation starting in June. So take a look at the Sales Globe website and you'll be able to get that information.
Yeah, and for those of you on the call today, you will be getting an email from Open Symmetry and Sales Globe. So we're going to give you a couple of opportunities, one to connect with us directly at World at Work, and then also we do have a sales compensation workshop that we'd like to talk to you about as well. So look forward to getting that in your mailbox in the next day or two.
Great. So let's take a look at some questions here. And Michelle and Rob, let me read the question. I'll take a first pass at it, and then you guys can jump in as well. First one is about using caps, and what are the pros and cons of using caps in the compensation plan. And that was one area that we didn't talk about, but we can chat about that for a couple of minutes here. Just my view on using caps, I would prefer to not have a cap on the compensation plan if I could choose. I think some of it has to do with philosophy of the organization and comfort with upside earnings. I think one of those questions you have to ask first is philosophical, which is how comfortable are you if a person earns more than his or her boss or earns more than say, the VP of sales or even the president of the company? And the answer to that question will tell you a lot about your tolerance for the upside earnings. But the reason we see caps in plans is usually out of fear. I'll use that word, fear, right? Yeah. So we're afraid people are going to earn too much. They're going to blow the plan out. It's going to cost way too much. One way to alleviate that is through effective modeling. And, Rob, with the kind of things you do with systems, you can model those scenarios and see if what happens if you hit those high levels. So we prefer to not have a cap on the plan so people can earn those high levels of performance. And also psychologically, I think it makes a difference because we hear more and more in the interviews about, oh, there's a cap on the plan, I don't like that. And then we'll ask the question, well, have you ever hit the cap? No. Do you know anybody that's hit the cap? Well, there was a guy a couple years ago. So it's more of the fact that it's there than it's a reality. So it becomes a psychological deterrent. But Rob, Michelle, thoughts on caps?
Rob, do you have any comment?
No, I agree with what Mark was saying. We don't often advocate for caps.
Yeah, we completely agree, and Mark is correct. So around the point of them being just demotivational, a lot of times just to pay, if your quotas are set right, and you know that 70% of your organization up to would hit that 50 to 70, you shouldn't really be concerned about that, and it can be a psychological issue with the sales reps. Often when we're interviewing them, we find out that they have a problem with the caps in the plan, and we will look back at performance, we'll find that no one has even reached the cap.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to kind of look at that. We have a few more questions that have come in there. Oh,
I was just going to offer one other thing. So the other thing you could think about doing is, as you get into excellence or past excellence, have a decelerator, right? So it might be 3%, 7%, then 5%, so that, obviously they're getting into the money sooner, but they're not getting, sort of the cap that could be a little bit of a moral demoralizer.
Yep. Okay, let's take another quick one here, and then we got a little more in-depth one. Can you offer a resource for recent sales trends? So depending on, I won't mention Jessica's last name, but what Jessica was asking here, obviously a lot of good sources on the web. Rob, I know you have a lot of great information in Open Symmetry in terms of trends because you guys have a lot of data with all the companies you work with. We also do at Sales Globe. I think it depends on the questions that you're asking. So, go back to that challenges thing. So if you ask questions like, tell me about upsides, or how are we moving to SaaS business models, or I think it just, let us know what those kind of questions are. So Jessica or others, if you have specific areas you're looking for, we can probably either get that information for you or point you in the right direction.
Yep.
And then there was another question, which is on slide 15. That was the one with the scatter plot. And this is from Valerie. What's your experience with companies trying this for the first time? And if there was a common bias or result that leads to having results skewed to the upper right of the chart, the green plus, or the lower left, the red plus? That's a great question.
Yeah.
So you have to know what you're paying for, first of all. So I think to that point we made, you've got to know what performance is. So I would first of all identify what is the most important performance measure to the business. Is it revenue, bookings, whatever that thing may be? And that's the one you want to chart primarily here. And then you want to make sure that for your upside performance, you're getting that result. Where things go awry, and I'm thinking of a tech company we worked with in the Southeast last year, man, they had people that were hitting upside pay, but they were falling to the lower side of that chart in terms of the attainment of their goals for the primary measures. It's because they were paying for other things that people were finding a way to earn around. So they were paying for things like getting a certain level of contract commitment or product mix, and that would give them accelerators. And we saw these people earning huge amounts of money but not even hitting their goal.
Right.
And the CFO had hired us, and when he saw that, he went through the roof.
Yeah.
But you got to look at what's in the mechanics of the plans that's driving those things.
Yeah. And there was another question here.
Yeah. How do you estimate, this is from Gene. How do you estimate the cost of an incentive plan to model 60% of reps reaching quota and also to see various results around that goal? Well, Gene, this is usually, when you're doing your plan modeling, you're setting up your model, whether it's a spreadsheet or in a system, so that you've got the new plan, and you may even have your old plan in there as well. But then what we're doing is we're running scenarios. So we're running scenarios like, what if everybody came in at goal? What if we had a bell-shaped curve? What if we had 60% of hitting the goal? What if everybody blew the goal out? What if everybody bottomed out? So we want to run those different scenarios, and then we'll run random ones as well, just to say, okay, let's run that random over and over and over and see what's happening there. But that's usually the way you'll set it up. Rob, you may have some comments on this, on the technology side around the modeling.
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely different options you can look at to leverage technology to help you do this, to do micro and macro modeling that Mark's talking about. I don't know that we've got a ton of time to go into all those options, but if there's a specific question or if you're looking at specific technologies, feel free to email me directly and we can follow up.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Okay, well, I think we're all set. If anybody has any additional questions, our contact information is there. Feel free to reach out to us. And Mike, we'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Thank you, Robert, Mark, and Michelle, for sharing your knowledge and time with us. I would like to draw your attention to the survey I mentioned earlier. It should be open now in a separate browser window on your computer. We value your feedback and ask that you will please take a few moments to respond to this short survey at your earliest convenience. Once again, thank you, Robert, Mark, and Michelle. This webinar will be available for playback for up to 90 days. Simply log into world.work.org. In the My Profile section under Webinars, choose Play Webinar. If you want to obtain HRCI certification credits, the HRCA program ID number can also be found on your My Profile page under My Certification. Then choose your designation and select View Details. Please allow 24 hours for that information to appear. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. That will conclude today's webinar. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.